All right, welcome everybody. We will officially get this going. If people are joining the wait room kind of late, we will make sure to add people as we keep going. But let's first do a round of introductions for all the people on our panel today. So I will start. So I am Megan Wyatt. I'm an undergraduate here at University of Oregon in the Earth Sciences Department. I completed field camp this last summer in 2019, and I'm also part of the Ideas Initiative, and I'm so happy to be helping out with this event today.
I'm Felicia. I'm also an undergrad at the Earth Science Department at U of O, and I also did field camp last year.
I'm Zach. I'm also an undergrad in Earth Sciences at UO, and I also did field camp last year.
Hi, I'm Rachel. For some reason, this lava is flowing uphill. I will work on that at some point during this adventure. But for now, this is just a fun video of lava that I took that is actually according to gravity, but there you go. So anyways, I'm a PhD student in the department. I TA'd field camp for the last 2 years, but I also completed my own field camp in undergrad at Idaho State University, which was an amazing experience. So I've kind of been involved in all kinds of field camp experiences. So I'm excited to be a part of this discussion today.
Hi, I'm Ellen. I'm a grad student and I TA'd field camp here at UO 2 years ago. And I also did field camp through Western Washington University, my undergrad back in the day. So yeah, stoked to talk to y'all.
Hello. So I'm a PhD student here at the University of Oregon. I've TA'd field camp twice. I also went to my own field camp. I've also done field work in cold conditions, hot conditions. I actually went to Kyrgyzstan this past summer, so also dealing with, being in a foreign country and stuff, but that might not be something we get into today. But anyway, I have lots of field experience if you need advice.
Excellent. So thanks again for all of our panelists for being here today. My first question for our panelists is a question that comes up all the time when we're thinking about field camp, and that is, what is the right gear to get for field camp? So this could be anything from your tent to the hiking boots, to clothes, to your backpacks.
Definitely bring clothes for colder weather. It might snow and you don't want to be unprepared.
You want to elaborate on that, Zach? What happened in our field camp?
Yeah, I packed for summer. Turns out at the top of Newberry, it was not summer and it was snowing. I then had to buy a bunch of stuff because I didn't have it with me.
Yeah, so what had happened in our year was that the first section of field camp, which is usually in mid-June, was at Newberry, and our campsite was in the caldera, which meant it was really high elevation and we had below freezing nights, which we did not expect. So yeah, that was something we didn't expect, was that we were going to have a lot of cold weather. So totally packing for all seasons, even though it's summer, is definitely good advice.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think people ask this question a lot, and I think field gear is really personal. And I think it's a good thing to acknowledge that you don't need to have the same things that everyone else has. It's a good idea to see what your peers are picking up and if that's something that will work for you. But maybe a particular brand of shoes isn't really going to be your particular brand of shoes. So you don't need to go out and buy the $250 or $350 pair of shoes if that doesn't work for you. But I think the thing that I would suggest is, no matter what gear you need, so like tents or whatever, if you need to buy stuff, definitely test it out. A lot of the places you can buy gear from, you can return it easily, and there's no shame in being like, well, it just didn't work for me. And test it out, so that way when you're at field camp, you already know it works for you, you already know how to wear it, you already know how to take care of it, you don't have to like fiddle with it. This is maybe more towards women's gear, but for instance, bras are very important to try with your field gear, because for instance, I got a really bad blister once on my shoulder from backpacking with a bra that was rubbing into my shoulder. But that's something that I wouldn't have known ahead of time unless I tried it out.
Yeah, I just want to bounce off that because I totally agree with Dana. And I think like the main thing I was thinking was, yeah, try anything. Like never have something that you're using for the first time in the field, and always have something that you've tried before, you like, you know that it works, especially shoes. And I think like that's a great way to prepare for field camp too, is to test out your shoes and go break them in and make sure that you don't get any blisters, because that I think can really change the field camp experience. If you have the right gear and you feel prepared and you feel comfortable in that gear, I think field camp can be a really positive experience. But if you feel kind of unprepared, it can be a little bit more uncomfortable. And so I think it's really important to try things out. And I think it's also good, kind of like Dana said, to ask lots of questions. And so if you don't know what to bring, reaching out to people that you know or people that have done this, any of us, for advice or on any specific gear item, I think is a great way to go if you've never kind of like been outside or camping or especially into the field. So
yeah, I'm gonna definitely go back to the shoes, because the shoes are just so important, and everyone's obviously been talking about those. Yeah, definitely break in your boots. You never want to go into the field not having worn your boots at least several times. Definitely, like, I'd recommend even like having months to break them in. The longer the better. And whenever I do field work, as long as I'm not like backpacking, I always have 3 different pairs of shoes. And so I have my hiking boots that are like the high, like above the ankle. And like above the ankle is really good if you're in an area that has rattlesnakes, because if rattlesnakes are trying to bite you, they usually just lunge, and like your ankle is the really vulnerable part. And so if you have boots that cover your ankle, you're less likely to actually get bitten, that they'll just hit the boot instead. And so having your hiking boots for in the field, and then usually when you get back to camp, I want to rip those boots off immediately, let my feet air out. And so I always have a pair of Chacos or other sorts of like outdoor sandals that I really like. And then I usually also have a pair of just like tennis shoes, which works if you're doing more like light field work and if you're not as worried about rattlesnakes. So having like the 3 different pairs I'd highly recommend. And then if you're in a wet area and your boots are wet, like you fell in a river or it rained a bunch and they weren't waterproof enough, then you have dry shoes for the next day, and hopefully then your other shoes will dry out. So the trifecta of shoes, highly recommend.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And then on that note, also, you brought up a great point of just having like kind of casual lounge shoes. That was something that I didn't really anticipate and that I didn't really prepare for very well, was thinking that like you're going to live in a camp and you're not always doing field work. And so I wished I had brought like maybe like 1 or 2 like good outfits that were just like for hanging out at the campfire in the evening, things to change out of when you're done with your sweaty field day and you just want to wear something casual to eat dinner. That was something that I didn't think very thoroughly about packing, that I wish I had more. I also wanted to bring up backpacks, because I know that that can be a really big decision for people who haven't bought a backpack before. So like I had never bought a hiking backpack before, like the Osprey REI like kind of brand of backpack. And I realized I bought too big of a backpack, meaning that my backpack was big enough that it made me want to fill it every day. And that was not good, because then I was looking around way more than I needed on the day-to-day basis. So for those of you who are familiar with the kind of liter sizes for backpacks, I had like a 36 liter backpack, which is what Ellen is showing here. Thank you so much for doing that. Where it's basically a standard backpack and then it has like a flap over it as well. That I found was a little bit big for what I needed if I was just using it for field camp. And I would personally recommend a 24 liter backpack, which is more on the size range of like your normal school backpack. And that would be a easy size for bringing in whatever you need for your field day. So that will easily hold a map board, a rock hammer, your Brunton, your lunch, all your water you need for the day, anything else you're hiking in and out with you every day.
It's actually kind of funny. I enjoy having a slightly larger field bag. Like the 35 is probably a little bit too much, but what I enjoy about this backpack is that it has like a frame. And so that's the thing about like my smaller one, that it doesn't have a frame. And so the back of it is just sitting directly on my back, and then it gets really sweaty. Like I just get a really sweaty back when I do field work. And so this is actually one that I used on my field camp, and it has like a really nice frame, and it has such a large area that I actually would put like my mat board behind and like tuck it there. And this is, I think this is something about like a 30. Yeah, this is a 30 liter. So maybe having like a 30 was pretty good. I'll say that when you pick a backpack, be really cognizant of like how comfortable it is, but also how you're going to like access things. And because this one, I actually found that I really don't like it, because the way it unzips, it like flops open. And so I usually have to like fully unpack it in order to get something out and then like repack it. And it just like isn't that conducive to like quickly grabbing something. Though I really like the brain in the top, having like the pouch where you put everything that you might need to like grab, like a snack or I don't know, like sunscreen, sunglasses, your hat, things that you maybe are like taking in and out a lot that don't fit on your field belt. And so yeah, definitely like I usually just go to REI. Like I got this one over the summer. And yeah, you could definitely, I'd shoot for like a 25 to 30 liter with a frame, but just ultimately pick something that is comfortable. Like you don't want to be uncomfortable in the field, because that's going to be just the worst.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something that I forgot to mention earlier was that something that I didn't realize before field camp was that each section of field camp is pretty unique. And with that also came how we're packing and using our gear. So like, for example, in the Montana section for us, which for us last year, that was our mapping section, we basically had our backpacks on us all day long because we were covering a lot of ground, and so it made sense to do that. However, for example, in the Paleo Set Strat section, which is what's pictured behind me, I took this picture during that section, we were basically just staying in one area all day. So it actually made more sense to put our stuff down and just like carry a water bottle with us as we're going up the outcrops. And so that might be something too to consider, is like, yes, you want to definitely make sure that you can have something that is comfortable wearing all day long, but you probably won't have to do that for all of field camp also. So also think about how versatile your stuff is. Like, do you have gear where if you're wearing a backpack all day long, you have the gear you need to do that, such as like maybe having a bladder water bottle that you can then easily access while you're walking, or also having a standard water bottle you can remove so that when you're in camp or if you're leaving your backpack somewhere, you also have water accessible.
So speaking on the amount of water that you should bring, I'd bring a minimum of 3 liters a day, preferably more. And I'm actually one of those really strange folks that doesn't use a water bladder. Most people do. I'd recommend it, even though I don't personally do it. I usually just have like 3 of these like liter water bottles, and like the ones from REI are really sturdy. Like you can drop them down a cliff and they don't break. So highly recommend something like that. Also, if you do have a water bladder, I would have at least 1 bottle backup, just because I know a lot of people who I've been in the field with have had their water bladder like get a hole. And so that's kind of what you really don't want, is to suddenly have, well, not only do you have like an entirely wet backpack because liters of water just drained out, but now you don't have water to drink in the desert for that day. So having some sort of like a safety net is never a bad idea.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the amount of water, like I didn't realize how much water I was going to be drinking until I was in that situation. So I was someone who like very easily could drink 4 liters of water in my field day, which was like insane for me to comprehend now how I could drink that much water. So for me, that was a 2-liter bladder. And then I had basically like 2 large hydro flasks because I preferred cold water and I didn't mind the extra weight of a hydro flask. But I know some people who don't want to have that extra weight, they prefer the Nalgene's, which are lighter water bottles as well. So definitely they'll say minimum 2 liters. That is definitely the minimum we usually recommend. More than that, or at least having options for more than that. Because you might find you don't need all of that, but then you might just want to have an extra clean water bottle to use in camp or something like that.
With the backpack thing, something that I've found that's helpful is I like the backpacks that have like little pockets on basically the hip strap. That way you can put things like a little bit of sunscreen in there, chapstick. Not all of them have that, so that's a feature that I really enjoy. But I also want to point out that we're talking about like fancy new gear that you can buy, but going to Goodwill, and I don't know if we could do that now with COVID, but in typical times, going to like secondhand stores is a great way to get field gear on the cheap. You don't always find like nice fancy backpacks, but for instance, I have a field belt that's basically just like a running belt, like that someone would put water bottles on to go on like a couple mile run. And I love it. And I got it for like $3 at a Goodwill. And it's one of those things that straps around your hips, but it has a place for basically like almost like half an Nalgene. And it has a little pocket, and I can put sunscreen in there and like a pencil. And then that way I can put my backpack down, just put that on, or even have it on underneath my backpack, and then just scramble up a slope. So things like that, you don't necessarily need to buy right from REI or a fancy store. Oh, and on the water thing, I definitely have like carried 5.5 liters with me in the desert and have drank most of it or given it away to students. So it's definitely good to err on more water than less.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say actually a great way to prepare for field camp too, and like do what we're all talking about in testing out gear is to actually like try and like put a bunch of stuff in the backpack, like put weight in it, put water bottles in it, put your hammer, put a bunch of rocks in there, and go for a hike or a walk outside your house. And that's actually a great way to both prepare for getting in walking shape, and also for testing the backpack, making sure it fits right, like these guys are talking about, and all that jazz.
Oh yeah, just bring an extra pair of sunglasses because I ruined mine getting hit with like shards of rock when I was hammering.
Yeah, bringing extras of things that could easily break during the field is definitely good advice. Does Ellen want to showcase her hand lens there?
Yeah, just super briefly. So you obviously you definitely want a hand lens when you're in the field. And I always recommend putting it on like a lanyard so then it's just chilling around my neck and I'm always ready. And I like this one that it has like a little like kind of case around it that it protects the lens. And speaking of bringing extras, I would bring 2 hand lenses to field camp. I know I personally, on my own field camp, I was looking at a rock and the lens just fell out and the glass conchoidally fractured on the outcrop below. And so that wasn't great, but at least I had a backup.
What advice do we have? We kind of touched on this already, but maybe just more general, what advice do we have for students who are going out for field camp either this next year or future years? Actually, it looks like everyone in our group right now is planning on attending field camp, at least in part this year. So at least for some experience, what advice do we have?
I think my advice is kind of rooted in my own start in field work, which was that I had no idea what I was doing. I was out there and I didn't know what an outcrop was. I didn't know how to make these maps that people were talking about. And I think I just want to give some advice that it can be really challenging, and it can be challenging for a lot of different reasons. It can be physically demanding, it can be academically demanding, it can be, thinking in 3 dimensions can be challenging. And so I think it can be hard, and I think not to get discouraged by that, but to really try to get the most out of it and see how awesome it is to be out there and be walking around and really try to learn from it instead of being discouraged by those things. And I think it can be a really transformative, life-changing experience actually to go out and do field camp with your friends and be out there, go on some epic adventures, have some great stories. And I think even if you're doing remote field work this summer, I think it can be demanding and challenging. And I think it's important to just not compare yourself to other people and to really focus on kind of learning at your own pace and going at your own pace if you're hiking, but really trying to just like focus on your own kind of journey through field camp and not getting discouraged by that. So that would be kind of my advice. That was definitely the hardest part for me, was kind of getting started. So I think that's definitely what I would give to all future field campers.
So I think I really liked everything that Rachel said. I think that's great. I think self-care at field camp is really important, and figuring out what you need to be happy, because you are outside, it can be very new, you might not be getting as much sleep as you'd want. So just figuring out little things that you can maybe bring with you, or you can do for yourself that help just make you feel more comfortable. For instance, I love bringing my own personalized snacks. So maybe it's dried fruit That's like, this is my favorite end all be all special snack that if I'm having a bad day, I get to eat. That's helpful. I think, yeah, having a bedtime routine that works for you in your tent and makes you calm down and get into the sleeping bag and get all cozy, and maybe you bring your favorite book that you've read like 50 times or something like that. I think those are really important. I think it's also what Rachel said about it's your own experience. So you will probably have a bad day at some point. It is impossible to go to field camp and never have a bad day. And if people tell you that, they're probably really good at lying about it. And so just realizing that you probably will have a bad day. It'll probably be a day that you're hot, or maybe you have a blister, or you got sunburnt, or you didn't bring enough water, or they served your least favorite food ever at dinner. So it's always good to ask for help if you need it. If you have a blister, asking people opinions about how to take care of it, or just acknowledging not every day is going to be your day, and that's okay.
Everyone has a bad day at field camp. I had several.
I guess to echo what Rachel and Dana have been saying, it basically is field camp is a unique challenge that if you haven't done field work, you haven't experienced it before. It's like a weird, delicate, like struggle balance between like your physical well-being and challenges and your emotional struggles, and then you're also trying to be a good geologist, do your field work, and that's something that you've never really done before. And so it's this really, it's you can't really ever fully prepare for it. You can kind of know that it'll be a challenge and know that it's okay that it's a challenge. Your instructors and your TAs are resources for you. They're there to support you, and like they've been there. They did their early field work back in the day, but they remember what it felt like for them when they had no idea what they were doing and they felt like they were drowning, and just they are your lifelines. And so reach out to them, like confide in them that you're struggling, and they will help you. They will be there for you.
Jesse is asking, is there time to exercise outside of hiking during field camp?
In terms of exercising during field camp, when I was doing my own undergraduate field camp course, I was still competing in track and cross-country skiing. So I still needed to exercise and train outside of that and such. And there's definitely time for it. You know, it might mean that you need to wake up a little earlier or go out a little later, but it is also very physically rigorous at field camp. So it is its own exercise. And so a lot of days you're not going to feel like you maybe need extra exercise on top of that. But there definitely is opportunities to go for jogs. I would definitely love morning runs as just a way to wake up. I did that when I was TAing field camp too. And I think it can be really nice to get your body moving in the morning. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to kind of, as kind of Dana said, make it your own experience in terms of taking care of yourself in whatever kind of way that means. If that means you need to exercise a little bit more, then there's definitely opportunities to make that happen.
So something that I always bring with me that's like my personal thing is I like to bring like a mat that's not the mat I'm sleeping on, but it's like a yoga mat, but it's like an old, it's not very good for sleeping on. But basically I use it as a yoga mat outside. And it's really nice because when you're done carrying a backpack like all day, you're really stiff. You've just been in like one position, right? Like heavy weight on your shoulders. And so using the yoga mat to like stretch out your shoulders is really key for me. And so little things like that, if you know that you would like to be able to sit down and stretch at the end of the day, bringing something you can sit on, because maybe the ground is gross at the campsite that you're sleeping at. Maybe it's dusty. Maybe you don't want to get dirty after all day. So that's something that I like to do. And also the shoe thing. So bringing shoes that maybe at the end of the day, you need a post-hike, like stretching workout. You can put those on and you don't have to do it in your hiking boots. It's really great. Or a bathing suit. People go swimming too sometimes if there's a body of water around.
So I know that for our field camp, 2 out of the 3 sections, we did have bodies of water that we were able to access, whether that was for recreation or just to sit by the water at the end of the day and just take in the breeze. As far as like time to exercise, really think of it as like you're kind of trying to stick to like a 9 to 5-ish as far as like the actual field work, but the evening there's actually quite a bit of downtime. So the evening is time to get caught up on the work that you need to do for field camp. That's time to socialize with the other people at camp. That's also when like making dinner happens, and there's different camp chores that happen. So there's definitely time in the evenings or in the mornings if you want to wake up early to have some time to yourself to exercise or be mindful and practice yoga or meditate or whatever else you want to do. I did hear from field camp alumni from 2018 when I was talking with them in my preparation that they used to do sunrise yoga every morning that someone led. So that was really cool. We didn't end up doing that in our field camp, but that was an interesting idea that I'd heard that they did.
I have to head out, but I just want to say that I love field work. I love field camp. It's my favorite part of geology. I've loved getting to get out there and go adventure around places that a lot of people never get to go and see. And it's an incredible experience, and it can be challenging, but it's really rewarding. So I have to get going, but happy field camping.
All right. Thank you, Rachel, for being able to join us.
Thanks all. Bye.
This might be more geared towards our field camp alumni students, but thinking about what your expectations were for field camp versus what actually field camp looked like, a little bit about your experience, what was unexpectedly hard, what was unexpectedly easy, if you guys want to speak to that.
It's hard to like kind of have an expectation for field camp because it's something that's like I've never done before, camping for so long. Didn't really know what to expect, but after going through it, I really enjoyed it. It was fun. I had a lot more fun than I ever would have imagined. Like just learning how to do the field work was very fun to me. I think the hardest part of it was finding the energy at like the end of the day to work on your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very helpful to do that because then you don't have to rush everything on work days and you can relax a little bit more.
So I kind of thought they were just gonna like dump us out there and leave us on their own, but it's a really guided experience, you know. You have the TAs and the instructors, and they always tell you what to do. They help you with anything, you know, they plan your meals for you. So you don't have to worry about a lot besides just doing your work. So it's really not that stressful as I thought it was going to be.
I was very stressed out and anxious before field camp, thinking it was going to be too challenging. I didn't know how I was going to survive this. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be an episode of Survivor that is just going to end badly. But I concur with that. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. I got so much out of that experience. I mean, to echo Dana, there were definitely several bad days in that 6 weeks, but I agree I overall had a positive experience from it, which was crazy because just like Zach had said, I had never camped for that long. I don't think I've ever camped for more than 2 nights. So that was insane to camp for 6 weeks in crazy conditions when it's like below freezing at night sometimes. And then we had a couple days in Eastern Oregon where it was 100 degrees. So it was pretty insane. And actually, I totally forgot to mention this earlier, but I had a recommendation for gear, which I know it's totally counterintuitive, but when it's really hot weather, you still want long sleeve shirts and long sleeve pants. Because even though our intuition is that it's hot, so we want to wear shorts and tank tops or t-shirts, it's actually more important that you have sun protection than having a material that is breathable so that even though you're sweating, you're not like collecting sweat. So that's something I totally forgot to mention in the gear section of this talk. Yes, thank you, Ellen, for demonstrating that. Yeah, the shirts I ended up getting at REI actually were like fishing shirts, technically, whatever that branch of shirts, because they're literally meant for just like sitting out in the sun all day. So they don't have to be specifically like for hiking or for doing this. There are several outdoor sports that you can use that gear for these same purposes as well.
I would recommend you can also get those shirts at Goodwill.
Yes, totally.
There's some in the little boys section that fit me. There's some in the men's section that can fit lots of people. I have bought like 2 of those shirts new, and the rest of them have all been secondhand, and they still work really well. And it can save you a lot of money because those shirts can be like $60.
So like, for example, I am plus size, so I actually wasn't able to buy anything in the store. But I totally like went to the store so I could like feel it, look at it, see which styles I liked. And then I just went bargain hunting online. And once I knew what I was shopping for, then you have that lens of like, okay, I'm just bargain hunting for these things. So yeah, definitely good to start looking at gear early so that you can you know, find all those really good deals on gear?
I recommend, I found a lot of really great deals online when I was shopping for my field camp, because I basically just didn't have any field gear. And I did Sierra Trading Post. I think now it's just called Sierra, but you can find some like screaming deals if you just keep kind of looking over time. And definitely prioritize getting like really lightweight and quick drying material. And so like you have those really lightweight long sleeve shirts, and then underneath I'd have like a polyester t-shirt that is really quick drying, because inevitably you're going to sweat a lot, and then you won't be like just having it plastered to yourself a wet shirt all day. And like same with underwear, I'd highly recommend getting very breathable, light, like quick drying underwear. You won't regret that. And then to kind of piggyback off what Zach said about, it's hard to find the energy to work in the evenings on the materials that you need to like do your final project. As a TA, I definitely saw people really struggling on the project days to get everything done. And there's just like some like just doing a small thing every night to get yourself so that then when the project day comes and you're supposed to be assembling everything and finishing everything, like those were crazy stressful days, and they really didn't need to be. And so just kind of like, you don't have to work a ton every night, just a little bit. And it'll make that project day just a breeze.
Yes, and for those of us on the call who maybe aren't familiar with the kind of day-by-day structure of field camp and the traditional field camp that we're doing in person, we usually have 2 weeks for each section, where we usually have about 10-ish field days. You maybe have a day or two off depending on the section, so that everyone can take a break to catch up on their hygiene or anything else, or any other recreational activities they want to do. And then there's like maybe 1 or 2 days that's like basically a finals week, but in just like a day or two, where you have to get all your stuff done and turned in, which are the most insane and stressful days of field camp to get all that stuff done. So yes, totally echoing off Zach and Ellen, doing like even half an hour of work every night. If it's just like, at least like starting to set up your scale for the cross section you're going to draw later, or just something simple like that, can make you so much happier for that day that you've already gotten that stuff done. Does anyone want to talk about like a favorite memory from field camp, or maybe just an experience that they look back on was like, oh, that was really amazing? That's a fond memory of their time in field camp, either as a TA or as a student.
Favorite / coolest memory of field camp was during my section in Eastern Oregon. Felicia and I were mapping, and we found some cowboy ruins from who knows when, but it's pretty cool. There's like the foundation of a house and like a really old stove and old tools that were rusted over. It was neat.
I regret not stealing it.
But yeah, so that's cool. And then other than that, I really enjoy just climbing any slope during field camp. It feels like I'm really out there exploring and, you know, just doing stuff.
Yeah. Did you do a lot of hiking and climbing like before field camp, Zach?
Hiking, yes. Climbing, no.
Okay. So that was something kind of newish that you were doing at field camp, like, oh, I kind of like this, and I didn't know that I liked this.
Yeah, it was new and I liked it and I enjoyed it a lot.
That's awesome.
On my field camp, we were often just camped out like in the desert in the middle of nowhere, like not even near any sort of civilization. And so we didn't have to worry about being like too loud or anything. We would have dance parties in the evening, like have like a nice bonfire and like turn on the music and just kind of like chill out and dance after everyone had stopped working for the night and like made dinner. And it was just a really nice like way to kick back and bond and dance in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
I have lots of great fond memories of doing field work all over the place. I think it's wonderful, the things you can find, the nature you'll see, the people. Like I once saw a shooting star with my professor at the time, and we were both like, oh, because it was like really beautiful. But I will say something that I like to do that's related to this is I definitely like to maybe bring my own journal so I can write things down that are like more personal, because you don't necessarily want to write tons of personal stuff in your field notebook. And it's great because it helps you remember the days. So you're like, oh yeah, that's the day that we saw this crazy rainbow and it was just awesome. Or that's the day that, like, you know, we saw this animal, and it'll help you remember it too. And it'll help you put together your projects and just like the places you were. And it's just wonderful to do that.
Yeah, and on the topic of field notes, this is maybe advice that I would have for students in preparing for field camp. I did not realize that, like every other time I've been in the field for like field trips for classes, I never really learned how to take thorough field notes of like, I walked to this place, I saw these things, these were the thoughts that I had about that thing. Like that was something that was kind of startling to me in the field, was like, whoa, I have to like journal all of that while I'm out there. So that was something I kind of wish I had practiced a little bit before I went out there, of trying to like estimate distance. Like I walked 100 feet west away from camp to find this, or things like that. Cause that's, when you're in the middle of nowhere, you're like, I have no idea where I am, but there's a big rock over there, and hopefully my teacher knows where that big rock is. So that kind of stuff would be helpful as well for preparation.
On the field notes, for me, I struggled to remember to put a scale and an orientation, like north, south, east, west, on all of my sketches. And so then later I'd go back to it and be like, ooh, like how big was that outcrop? And I'd like look at my pictures and try to compare. And so yeah, definitely err on the side of taking more notes in the field than you think you need, because it will later, you out of the field trying to work on your project will thank field you. Though definitely be conscious of not spending too much time taking notes to the point where then you are inefficient at getting your work done.
Mm-hmm. So going back, I would say my favorite memory of field camp was doing bone quizzes in the paleontology section. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a paleontology track student. And so our paleontology professor would take all of the stuff that we found from the day, which was quite a lot. We would empty out all of our pockets for all the stuff that we had found. And then we would basically go around and practice identifying them. Sometimes we were wildly off. Sometimes we got a little bit close. Sometimes we were just completely stumped. But that was always kind of a fun way to like reflect on the day and like remember like, oh yeah, I remember collecting that. I didn't really think it was anything, but now I've learned this is this really cool thing, and I like actually collected that myself, and I've contributed to science, and that was like always a really cool feeling of like reflection at the end of the day for me.
One thing I really was shocked at from my field experience was just how different it was comparing like me at the end of, I actually did an 8-week field course compared to me at the beginning of it. Just like I was so much more in shape, so much more skilled with field work. I learned so much. I like had a lot of trials and tribulations, a lot of ups and downs, and like came out stronger and had a really great, it's really good like bonding with all the people that you do field work with, and just kind of comparing, looking back at the beginning to the end, like you'll be surprised at where you end up.
Okay, I have like 2 completely different ideas that I think we talked about. One, so we talked about gear, and this is another gear thing. Bring something to wash your underwear with. Because you don't want to pack, I don't know, if you're there for 6 weeks, you might only have access to laundry every now and then. I actually only usually TA one section, and we don't do laundry. So I usually have to bring underwear for 2 weeks, but I actually get around that by bringing a small Tupperware I can shake around with some soap and wash my underwear with. So that's my little hack that I think everyone should get better at, because no one should carry around dirty underwear. It's horrible. And then the other thing is that this is more about like team bonding or group bonding. You're going to be working with these people for a long time, 6 weeks maybe, and not everyone has the same communication skills. And so it's also good to acknowledge that and make sure that if you have the ability that day and you're not having a bad day and you're having a good day, to communicate with your team members, check in with them, make sure they're doing all right, because maybe they are having a bad day and you just don't know it because they feel embarrassed to maybe talk about it, or they don't know how to express themselves. So it's always good to think about that, and because it's really easy to just like get into the mindset of like, let's go, let's get there, let's measure the thing. It's like 100 degrees out, let's just get it done. But it's good to talk to one another, because ultimately these are going to be your friends for 6 weeks. You want to make sure it's a positive experience. You want to make sure that you're working together and you're learning from each other and you're not working against each other.
Yeah, and especially when you have that many students all coming in at the same time, it's inevitable that arguments are going to happen, disagreements are going to happen, that tensions will arise within people in the group. And yes, it's totally important to remember that everyone there is under a very stressful situation. And so pack your patience and remember that this is not them, this is field camp version of them that is very stressed out, and this is the way that that is expressing itself at this moment.
Tensions are running high. I've seen a lot of really like dumb, pointless arguments arise, and then people are like having really rough days, and so they just really can't see eye to eye because they're both going through a hard time and not kind of realizing that like that the way people are acting, someone else is interpreting it, misinterpreting it, and then taking it personally. And like especially between like field partners, when you're trying to like hike around and reach all the outcrops and get all of your work done, but then like maybe one person wants to take longer or is a slower hiker, or like there's a lot of like things that can arise, and definitely just try to always find common ground and realize that maybe you think that they're like mad at you or they did something to slight you, and maybe just kind of take a step back and realize that everyone's having a rough time, and reach out to, if you're needing a conflict mediated, that's what your TAs and your instructors are for. Like, don't just let something stew. Like, let us know. We want to resolve things. We want to help people out. And like, worst case scenario, you absolutely can't work with your field partner. Like, we'll work something out. We'll find a solution. Safety first. I just realized that we haven't really talked about safety too much. Just like, it's important to, reach the outcrop, get the rocks, get the strikes and dips, make it to your destination, make your map. But at the same time, it's okay to leave part of your map blank if you're out of water, and if you try to push yourself to hike there, then you become dehydrated and make yourself sick. Or if you're, don't push it. Stay safe. That is definitely the most important thing. Be safe, be healthy, be happy, and also have a great time in the field.
Yes, and since we didn't get much time to talk about that, we do have more information about that on our website. Specifically, we have first aid kit recommendations from our field preparation last year. And then we also have some tips on taking care of yourself, so personal hygiene and things like that. We will wrap this up. So I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. Thank you to all of our guests who have joined us today for this live webinar. I am dropping in the chat our email address. So if you have questions that you think of later, feel free to send us an email. We'll be happy to answer them.
Everyone should consider applying for the Ideas Field Scholarships, and those applications are due on the 1st, which is Monday. That an email had gone out like last week that had that application attached, and I think a reminder email is either coming out or has come out in the last day or two. And so definitely those scholarships are meant for field gear, for people who are just getting started in the field, which I imagine is all of you who are watching this webinar and participating. So please look at that application and apply.
Yes, and if you don't have that email or don't know what we're talking about, feel free to email us at ideasuo@gmail.com, and we'll feel free to forward that to you as well if you were not already on that communication. So with that, thank you everyone for joining. Have a great rest of your day. Look forward to possibly hosting another one of these as we get closer to field camp, maybe when we know more about what's happening this summer. But again, if you have more questions, send us an email. Thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye, everyone.